reach out to me. If it deals specifically with the rules of the sport of football, you'll deal with Larry McCloy, who you will meet later on in this presentation. I'd like to put a plug in for the West Virginia Coaches Association. We appreciate our relationship with them and what they do. They provide student athlete scholarships, Coaches of the Year awards, Retired Coaches of the Year award. They sponsor the North-South football game. They sponsor the hospitality room at the state basketball tournaments. Most importantly, they are a unified voice that deal with our young people and high school sports and things that we need to do if we have legislative issues that we need to deal with. And so we appreciate their support and their unified voice in that aspect. This is an important reminder. You are responsible for the knowledge and the entire content of the materials presented and referenced today. This includes, but is not limited to, the SSAC Rules and Regulations Handbook, the Coaches Packet, Sports Medicine Packet, Football Playoff Manual, and the Interscholastic. What we hit today in this presentation is only a highlight. As the coach, you are responsible for the knowledge and content of that information. Your required readings in which you need to have knowledge come from the August Interscholastic, Football Rules and Regs Handbook, the Coaches Packet, your Sports Medicine Packet, and your Football Playoff Manual. All those documents are accessible on our website. For our website, click on Sports and click on Football. Where you see the red ribbons is where you can get your high school football packet, your middle school football packet, and your Sports Medicine Packet. And right above that, you'll see Resources, and that's where the Playoff Manual is located. These are the important 2024 progression dates for high school football. First practice, August 5. Days 1 and 2 are helmets only. You cannot have contact with anything at all. That's August 5 and 6. And August 7th and 8th, days 3 and 4, you can add shoulder pads. When you add shoulder pads, you can only hit soft equipment. That's other pads, not people in any way. You can hit a blocking sled, a blocking dummy, a shield, a tackling wheel, but not people in any way. Pads on pads only. On day 5, August 9th, you add full pads. That means you added your pants today. Now you have soft equipment contact again. Again, you can only hit pads on this day, August 9th. Finally, on day 6, you go full pads and full contact. That's August 10th. First scrimmage date's August 16th after 4 p.m. And the first game that game week is August 26th, 31st. Most people are playing on Friday night, August 30th. These are the 2024 progression dates for middle school. Days 1 through 3, again, helmets only, no contact at all. That's August 12th through 14th. On August 15th, you add shoulder pads. When you add shoulder pads, again, you can only hit pads, not people. On days 7 through 8, starting August 19th, you add the pants. You're fully dressed, but you're still only having soft contact with pads. And then finally, on August 21, day 9, you have full pads, full contact. Your first scrimmage week is the week of August 26th. Your first game is the week of September 2nd. And the season ends November 2nd. I want to remind coaches to make sure you know the definitions of the different types of contact, control, thud, and live action. Note that live action has limits. It's limited to 30 minutes a day and 90 minutes a week, and you'd have that documented in your practice schedule when you are doing live action contact. That is body to body with the intent somebody can end up on the ground. There are limits on 2-a-day practices. You can have 2 practices in the day, but never on consecutive days. If you do it on Monday, you cannot have 2 practices again on Tuesday. You have to wait till Wednesday. All practices, whether single session or double sessions, can only be 3 hours of physical activity. That includes on-field practice, the weight room, and conditioning. Whatever you do, make sure all of your athletes on your roster are on your eligibility. 3 reasons why. 1, you could have to forfeit games, and nobody wants that. 2, there are fines involved, and we don't want your money in that way. 3 is we need an athlete to be on the eligibility in order to be qualified for catastrophic insurance if we would have an injury, and that family need that type of financial assistance. Duties of a coach. Make sure you properly plan your activity, that you document it, and that you always keep records of your practice schedule. In those practice schedules, you're going to show that you're providing proper instruction, proper techniques that build successful players, but that also warrant the inherent risk, and because of the techniques that you teach, you are more preventive of certain type injuries. You need to make sure that you have documentation that you're providing a safe physical environment, checking that every day, and that your equipment is safe and adequate to use each day. Match your athletes appropriately. We always say don't put that young little freshman against a superior senior linebacker in a drill, because that wouldn't be appropriate. Evaluate your athletes for injury. Know what's going on. Hopefully your athletic trainer is also giving you updates every day on the status of your athletes, but also know the status of their mental health. Be in touch with school administration and know what's going on in their lives if there's issues at home or something, so that you know how to handle that kid coming into practice on a daily basis. Supervise the activities closely. We talk about this every year. Coaches, you need to not allow the dressing rooms to be unsupervised, and you do not want to send your team out onto the field early and not have one of the assistant coaches out there on the field with them. Providing appropriate emergency assistance, we'll discuss a lot in this presentation. The bottom line is, do you document, do you have records, and do you every day operate in a way that protects against the physical and psychological harm from others for your individual athletes. It is important. I think everyone agrees with that. Many people are blessed to be in different roles around that circle of the shaking hands. And one thing, if you've done that, you know that sometimes your perspective is different depending on your role that day. What we really ask is that you keep everything in perspective with your behavior, regardless of your role that day, and that we operate in what is the best interest of our athletes and the best interest of the sport. No tobacco is allowed at any middle school or high school athletic event, regardless of the venue. Numbers from the NFHS show that participation in high school football continues to increase across our country, which is good news. One reason that numbers have continued to increase is the increased playing of 9-player, 8-player, and 6-player football across our country. Many rural areas are seeing a great upswing in the number of teams that are being playing in high school football in the 9, 8, and 6-player versions. Just whatever you do, don't let anyone be involved in your program or coach your team in any way that has not been approved by your Board of Education. And they also should have completed the Form 39 and be registered with the State Department of Education. You're liable for anybody else's involvement in your program. If you have any eligibility issues with any players, please discuss those with your administration. Make sure that player is eligible. And obviously, if your administration has any questions at all, we are available to them at any time. Bench clearing situations in football, we'll have some fights in football. We know that. So let's make sure that the assistant coaches continue to do a great job of keeping everyone else on the sidelines, not letting them run out onto the field when a fight occurs. Let's make sure we teach our players on the field, get away from the fight. Don't run to the fight. Don't try to break the fight up. Get away from the fight so you're not considered to be involved. We would rather suspend 2 to 3 players involved in a fight than suspend 23 who run to the fight. We no longer have a 3-week period. We have 32 flex days instead. We're currently in a cycle that will end on Friday, June the 6th and start over again on Monday, June the 9th. Flex days can't be used the first week of another high school or middle school season. Any part of the day counts as the whole day. They can't be used on a Sunday without our board's approval. They can't be used as part of the tryout. It's very important to understand 8th graders cannot be moved up to high school for flex days involvement until they've completed the 8th grade. Flex days do not roll over the previous year. If you're doing consecutive flex days and you're in the sport of football, then you can meet your progressions. That is held individually. And once you would take more than 3 days off, those progressions would have to start over. Anytime you're dealing with football progressions and flex days, there's never live contact and you're never fully dressed. Information, it takes 12 days to be eligible for your football team. So regardless of when a player joins the football team, they must get 12 days of practice in to meet the progressions. The only exception is the military rule, in that if you have a student who is at basic training and returns to practice late in the summer, they will only need 10 days of practice or 2 weeks. Middle school football, we now play overtime until there's a winner. It's not optional. We want on-field mics at every game, and they are required now for playoff games. We also want middle school football to be handled by officials and coaches and all involved as a more of a professional event and less of a rec league event. So let's look the role, let's behave the role, and let's enjoy middle school football in a professional manner. Rules and regulations to cover. Semester and season rule. Once a student enters the 6th grade, they will now have 14 consecutive semesters of eligibility. So once you enter the 6th grade, your eligibility clock for middle school and high school sports start. and that will reduce the number of redshirt years that is possible for athletes in middle school. Out-of-season coaching. Best example of this rule change is, say we have a middle school football coach who has been involved with the youth league or rec league. They're allowed to serve on the board of directors or an officer in those leagues now and still be a middle school football coach. Expelled students, whether they're in-state or out-of-state, cannot transfer to another school and be eligible. They will not be eligible until the entire length of their expulsion has expired. Residence transfers, students in grades 6 through 12 who live out of state and transfer to a member school are not eligible for extracurricular activities. They would have to sit out 365 days. The non-school participation rule has changed some. This was, a lot of people call this the dual sport rule. You still cannot play AAU, travel, or rec league sports in the same sport at the same time of your school season. However, students that are playing a education-based sport may participate in activities such as fundraisers or tryouts or pictures or a showcase event during your basketball season. In order to do any of these things, though, they must have principal approval and they cannot miss a school event to attend. Reminder that at the office we do get a lot of reports of recruiting, and recruiting is not allowed. However, we do need evidence. If you provide us evidence, we have put together a group that goes out and will investigate these things, but we do need evidence, not hearsay. If you have that, we would love to have it at the office. Out-of-season coaching, just to review that, if you're a middle school coach, you cannot work with anyone except grades 4 and below. And if you are a high school coach, you cannot work with anyone except grades 7 and below. Also, a reminder that no athlete in middle school can turn 15 before July 1, and no athlete can be eligible in high school if they would turn 19 before July 1. We no longer evaluate our officials. If you have positive comments, negative concerns, any issues you need us to look at, please email those to Larry McCloy at refrules90@gmail.com. I want to talk about the appeals process for disqualified players. Coach, you do not initiate that appeals process. It must come from your administrator. It must be on the proper form within 24 hours. And any video to back up your appeal is greatly appreciated as the committee looks to review that situation. Your administration is to post all football game scores by noon on Monday. It is very important that this gets done, so we need to work together to make sure those deadlines are met. 2024 football goes to a 4-class sport, so therefore Quad A counts as 15 points in the system. In a revised strength of schedule component, Quad A counts as 1.5. And a big change in the bonus points, all bonus points for wins will be 1 bonus point regardless of class. So the phrase in their class or above was removed. For 2024, the policy requiring that a school play 6 teams in your class or above has been waived. It will go into effect again next year. We want to really encourage you to keep your program and roster updated online. The media and various organizations and people really need your rosters to be updated. The official football is the Wilson GST. It's required for all playoff games, so you want to use that on a daily basis. Also, remember, if you're fortunate enough to make the state playoffs, there's a required week 1 meeting in our office. The head coach and an administrator must attend. And then if you advance to the state football championships, you'll come back for a meeting week 4 also. All coaches must take the concussion in sports course and the sudden cardiac arrest course every year. All new coaches have to take heat illness prevention. If it's been a while since you took the heat illness prevention, we suggest you take it again. All these courses are free. They're available on nfhs.learn.com, or the link is available on the WVSSAC website. This is another course that we would recommend because, Coach, you have legal duties. And one thing that you could do to put yourself ahead of other coaches is be certified in proper tackling techniques and skills by the National Federation. For a player who is ejected, there is a suspension that follows. First time it's 1 game, second time it's 2 games. If this event would have happened the last game of the season, underclassmen, it carries over to the first game next season. For seniors, it carries over to the next sport. Another important point is if a player is ejected or a coach is ejected, you cannot attend the game the next Friday night. In other words, you can't have a player that gets ejected, then comes to the next game and wears their jersey and stands on the sideline. They are not allowed to be in the attendance. Also, that would apply to the coach. Whatever you do, it is state law that you do not practice high school football without an athletic trainer present. So if your athletic trainer for someone can't be at practice, you should not go on the field and practice that day. There's a new House Bill 602 dealing with sudden cardiac arrest prevention. I'll highlight a couple of the things. Many of the things were already in place from the SSAC. The SSAC is not involved in House Bill 602. We're just trying to give you some information. One thing that they do require is you obtain a parent, guardian, and student signatures for those that attend an informational meeting about sudden cardiac arrest school-wide. Also, your EAP is now supposed to be posted on your school website. Another component of House Bill 602 is if you have a student or an athlete that has a fainting episode during or after an athletic activity, they cannot participate again until they're clear for participation by a physician, a certified nurse practitioner, a certified nurse specialist, or a licensed physician assistant. Note, this is not the same health groups that can diagnose concussions or return a player to action from a concussion. This list of medical providers was provided by your state legislature and does not match the concussion protocol. Please do not let a player attend or participate in any practice without a completed physical. That physical should take place after May 1, 2024, and it should have 4 signatures on it, 1 by the student, 2 by the parents, and by the doctor. One of the physical form where the student and the parent signs the form. This is page 2 of the physical form where the parent signs it a second time and the physician signs the physical form. That is now a legal document, and we tell all of our school administrators, keep any medical, any physical, anything related to the child's health for 5 years. At the end of the season, box them up, label them, keep them in the closet. When you print the physical form, you automatically get this concussion form, and you also automatically get a sudden cardiac arrest form. House Bill 602 requires that you have an informational meeting school-wide about sudden cardiac arrest. Giving your parents and players that concussion form and this sudden cardiac arrest form and having them sign if they received it is also really good advice and suggestion that each coach do in their program. You may also want to give the opioid form, because even if we have an athlete that gets prescribed an opioid prescription, we want to encourage limited use. It's proven now that anyone can be addicted to an opioid drug in just 5 days. AEDs are required at all of our events, practices, and games. Please make sure your batteries and your pads are up to date. Prior to all athletic contests, there should be a medical timeout. It should involve an administrator, 1 official, 1 coach, your athletic trainer, and any emergency medical personnel that are there that night, where everything can be discussed as far as supplies, equipment, responsibilities, so that if we have a medical emergency, there is 0 response time and we are ready to respond and help that patient. Your emergency action plan is required prior to your first practice. It's also very important that you remember somewhere documenting your practice schedule and have records that you practiced each of those events. Have you practiced a heat stroke? Have you practiced what happens if you have a sudden cardiac arrest? Have you drilled these events and have a record of it so that if they would happen during the season, you are more prepared? One of the inherent risks of football is paralysis. That was some of your legal duties. One way to make sure that you warn your players about the inherent risk and that you show proper blocking and tackling techniques is to show them the NATA heads-up video. You can get that video on Google or YouTube. I would suggest that you have your players watch that video before you go to live contact and that you document it and have them sign that they viewed the video. Heat illness policy, it does apply to all practices and conditioning activities, but we do have a common sense involvement when it comes to our games or contests. We need to have common sense modifications. Prior to the game, that may be an athletic trainers reporting to school administration and officials what the heat index is. and deciding to delay the start of the game until a little later in the evening. The heat index in the black and the red and otherwise often makes modifications or shuts down activities. It doesn't shut down the game, but these common sense modifications have got to be in place. We want to make sure that if we have an athlete that looks disoriented or maybe showing signs of a heat illness, they get treated immediately. And it's also very important if this happens that although you have activated your emergency action plan and you've called EMS, that you are cooling their core body temperature immediately. You should have an ice tub that we have provided you, and you also should have, if you don't have that, you can go to Dollar General and buy a kiddie pool, fill full of water and ice, and have it ready for someone to get in. But immediately start to cool that person's core body temperature. Do not wait on EMS. And remember, on a daily basis, make sure you're keeping a record of the wet bulb globe thermometer so that you have records of what the heat illness was in any situation at time during practice. These are the 7 approved healthcare providers who can evaluate a concussion and return a kid to play. That's a medical doctor, a DO, a DC, a nurse practitioner, a PA, a certified, licensed athletic trainer, and a licensed PT. Now you have to remember this does not include our limited authorized athletic trainers. Time we have an athlete removed from a contest that shows any signs or symptoms of a concussion, they have to be evaluated by one of those 7 healthcare professionals. If one of those 7 healthcare professionals is not available, coach, it's very important you don't put them back into that activity or that game. If a doctor would come out of the stands or one of those 7 healthcare professionals is there in their personal capacity, but they're willing to evaluate the athlete, they tell you they're good to play, make sure you get that written and signed by that individual. If you ever have a doubt, coach, and you don't have one of those 7 healthcare professionals, do not put your athlete back in the ball game for any way with suspected head injury. If someone is diagnosed with a concussion, they have to go through the progressions of the return to play protocol. That's one progression for a 24-hour period. If they go through a progression and do not have signs or symptoms, they can progress to the next progression. However, at any point along the way, if signs or symptoms being that they are nauseated, dizzy, sick at their stomach, headache, any of those things, they must return to that progression 24 hours later and try again. They cannot advance, but they do not have to regress. Remember, it's 24 hours, best case scenario for each of those progressions, and then still doctor approval once they know that they have met the progressions of the protocol. If a student is evaluated for a concussion, if the official brings a player over and says, hey, we need to get this player checked out, then make sure you fill out part 1 on our website online of the concussion reporting form. You have 7 days to do part 1. If they were found to have a concussion, you must go back and complete part 2 of that form within 30 days. Part 1 and part 2 are very simple, typed in information where you're either documenting that they were evaluated but no concussion was found, or you are showing that they have met their progressions in the date that they did so. Officials, if you go to the WSSAC website, click on Officials tab, you'll see Officials Packets, click Football. That's where you will find your officials packet. We encourage you to go through that packet, read that material, and become familiar with everything as far as that content is concerned. We also want to point out important dates. They're already in progress. We do know that. We're already to part 2, but part 1 began July 22nd, closed August 11th. We're in part 2, which opened on the 12th, closes on the 22nd. Make sure you get your test taken on time. If you don't, failure to take part 1, you lose 5 points on your classification scale, and failure to take part 2 can result in suspension for the following season. And we don't want you to be suspended, and hopefully you don't want to be suspended because we need officials. Other important dates for officials: self-nomination form is due October 7th. Game reports are due by December 15th. We are asking that each officiating board get with the coach of all their local schools and schedule a meeting in which an official or 2 go out and meet with those players and those coaches. We have 3 goals in that. 1 is to improve the relationships between the coach, player, and officials. 2 is to clear up any rules questions for all players and coaches, to explain the new rules, and for this year, very important that you understand the difference in improper equipment and illegal equipment. Larry is going to give you full details on that in his presentation. And we also simply want to encourage players to consider or plant that seed of them becoming an official someday, because we need younger people to get into officiating in the sport of football. The selection process for postseason is always in question. Things that are considered are professionalism, test scores, your years of experience, your schedule, your quality of your work. You have to self-nominate. And of course, observation reports. Almost all games are available now for observation through Huddle Video. We just want to remind you that it's a very tough process, and every year we work very hard to give good officials assignments for the postseason, but it doesn't mean that every official deserving is going to get everything they should. It's a very tough task, and we do the very best that we can. Special reports, a couple things. Please verify the level before you submit your special report. Also, just give me the facts. And also, we would like a crew to get together, make sure the facts are accurate before the special report is submitted. Don't do it so quickly that you leave out something that's very important, and make sure that you're in agreement as a crew of what transpired on the field. If you have lightning or thunder, you must shut down for 30 minutes. If we have additional lightning or thunder, during those 30 minutes, the clock starts over. Do everything you can to get the game played that night, even if it goes to after midnight into the next day. It's important we try to get the games played, because bringing everyone back in the logistics of trying to restart a football game is very difficult. Officials, if you're Class 3, first-year official, you cannot work varsity games. There's a rare exception given if you're going to be completing a crew of 5th man, but if it's 6 or 7-man crew, we would never approve a first-year official being a part of that. State Law 61-2-15A is very important. I'd like you to remember that code. Work with your local law enforcement that has jurisdiction in the area if you would ever be physically assaulted as an official or a coach. Make sure that local law enforcement knows that they have to file this in magistrate court, not in city court, so that action can be taken on those individuals. Finally, we have sold out the simplified and illustrated rule books. Officials, if you need equipment, you know you can get it from purchaseofficials.com, officiallysports.com, or Dan's Sports Shop. Also, I would just like to say we really appreciate the work that Larry McCloy does as state football clinician. Larry is also the chair of the NFHS Football Research Committee, and does a great job for the state of West Virginia, and is well recognized and respected across the nation as a football official and clinician. And at this time, he will be taking over for the remainder of the football presentation.
NFHS football rule change presentation. My contact information is on the screen. The email address and phone number remains the same as last year. Please feel free to reach out to me by email, text message, or phone call with any football rules questions or mechanics questions you may have, and I will answer them back to you as quickly as possible. We only had one rule change nationally this year, and that involves the home team jersey. The jersey of the home team has to be the same dark color. We had a loophole in the rule to where last year a home team could have worn multicolored dark jerseys. I have never seen this, but it happened somewhere nationally, so we had to correct the rule to say that the dark colors must be the same. These two jerseys here are the same. They're a dark color that contrasts with white, making these legal home jerseys. These two jerseys are different color. Last year, this could have been worn by the same home team, but this year, with the new rule change, these jerseys would be illegal as they are not the same color. These jerseys are all multicolored, making these illegal home jerseys since they do not match. Editorial changes. Make note that on the signal chart, last year's signal 42 was used for both holding and illegal use of hands. This year's signal 42 will only be used for holding. Signal 43, the illegal block on the back signal, is now also the correct signal for an illegal use of hands penalty. Tooth and mouth protectors. Players are only allowed to have one tooth and mouth protector on their person during a down. We will talk more about this here in the future slides. Religious medals and medical alert bracelets are allowed to be worn. Religious medals have to be taped to the body and be worn under the uniform. Medical alert bracelets have to be taped to the body and can be visible and must be visible. Basic spots, Rule 10.4.2d, with the penalty enforcement code that we changed back in 2023. When the rule change for penalty enforcement was put into Rule 10, it was not put into Rule 10 correctly in black and white print. So the editorial committee has gone back in and corrected this to make the current rule that was changed in 2023 to match the rule change that was made last year. So for example, with holding, let's say you had holding 6 yards behind the line of scrimmage. 2 years ago, we would have penalized from the spot of the foul, and if the hold occurred 6 yards behind the line of scrimmage, that would have made that hold a 16-yard penalty after the mark-off. Last year with the rule change, we know that we went back to the previous spot and enforced that penalty 10 yards. So Rule 10, the rule book now matches up with the ruling. So officials make note of that when you're studying your rules. Everything in Rule 10 should now be printed correctly. Some football rule reminders. This is the year where the numeral has to clearly contrast with the body of the jersey. The body number has to be a continuous single collar, and schools have had 5 years to prepare for this change. If you have any questions on the legality of a jersey, please send me a picture, reach out to me. I will then rule on it, and if I am unsure if it's a legal jersey or not, it will be forwarded to my boss nationally, and he will respond back to me with the correct reply. Towels must be a solid collar. They do not have to be the same collar. However, towels are not allowed to have any writing on them. So make sure there is no writing, and it's just a single solid collar towel worn by the team. Intentional grounding. There's been no change made to intentional grounding, but just a reminder that for the ball to be thrown away legally, only the player who possesses the football following the snap is allowed to have this provision. He must throw the ball away back to the line of scrimmage, and at some point during the down, he had to be outside the lateral boundary of the free blocking zone, which is 4 yards either side of the football. The NFHS mark is now 2 marks. They are coming out with a new logo. This logo is mandatory to be on footballs for varsity play. So if you are purchasing your football and you see a new looking NFHS logo, just know that there is a new logo coming out. The new logo on the right is bigger than the current one that we've had in the past, but either one of these logos is acceptable. Some football points of emphasis. Sportsmanship is always a point of emphasis. Player equipment and enforcement's the one we're going to focus on the most, and formations. So sportsmanship, we're all in this together. The one thing that I will say on sportsmanship is officials, make sure that you also communicate with assistant coaches, as long as the assistant coaches are communicating with you in a professional manner. They are putting in a lot of time as well with the student athletes, and I feel that if they are being professional with the officiating crew should also have the courtesy to be professional back to them. One of the areas that we are having a problem nationwide with altercations and fight occur after the game is over in the handshake line. Now, officials, we do not deal with this. This would be a game administrative issue, as once we declare the fourth period officially over, then we are not penalizing for any acts that occur after that. However, there is a protocol in your rule book on pages 4 and 5 that gives schools and players a recommended way to conduct the handshake line following a game. This slide shows the required equipment a player must have to play in a down. The one we are going to touch base on are the knee pads. And knee pads, to be worn legally, have to be worn over the knee and under the pants. There's no exception to this. They do make pants long enough to fit any high school player, regardless of their size. So if coaches say pants are not available, I can't get them long enough, they can get them long enough. They're just not trying hard enough to get the proper pants for that player. So just remember, knee pads must be over the knee and under the pants, so the pants obviously have to cover the knee as well. Where we're going to focus most of our time in this presentation is on illegal equipment. We are having a major problem nationwide with illegal equipment being worn. Now, this is different than this previous slide, where if a player has the required equipment on his person, but he is not wearing it properly, this is never a penalty. We're just going to take an official's timeout and send the player out of the game until correction is made. So for example, an example of that would be a player not having his mouthpiece in. He has a mouthpiece, but prior to the snap, he doesn't have it in his mouth. He has it, he's not wearing it correctly. This is just stop the game, send him out, no penalty, until correction is made, and he must be out for at least one down, or unless halftime would occur or overtime would occur, because we treat them the same as we would an injured player. Now, illegal equipment is stuff that a player is not allowed to wear. So, with this being said, we must educate players, coaches, parents, and even officials on what players are not allowed to wear during a football game. And one of the ways that we do this is we have to enforce a rule that we've had in place for over 40 years, maybe 60 years. We have to enforce the illegal equipment rule as written in the rule book. The NFHS wants officials to enforce this rule the way it is written. Now, I will say, in West Virginia in the past, we have not enforced this rule correctly. We have dealt with the issue. If we see illegal equipment on the field, most officials will address it and say remove it, take it off, pull it down. But by doing so, they were not enforcing the rule as written. And the written rule is very harsh toward the head coach, because if a player is found to have illegal equipment on his person, that is 15 yards unsportsmanlike on the head coach. So if an officiating crew sees 2 instances of illegal equipment on the same team, that coach is disqualified for that game, and he must also sit out the following week. So we are going to enforce this rule across West Virginia as written. So officials, if that means in week number 1 you have to throw out half the head coaches across the state, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that referee. But if we would do that just for 1 week, we are not going to have a problem the rest of the season, because I'm sure that head coach will not let it happen again. That's why the rule is written the way it is. It must be enforced. The National Federation of High Schools wants this rule enforced as written. So, what are some examples of illegal equipment? These are the ones that we see probably the most often, but it's not just limited to these. So, eye shields that are not 100% clear are illegal. For a player to wear an eye shield with tint, a few things have to happen. The school administrator of that school has to contact Wayne Ryan at the WVSSAC office. Wayne will then look in to the background of that student modifications in the classroom, modifications may be made in that student's everyday life. And if Wayne Ryan approves for a tinted eye shield to be worn, he will provide that school a signed letter by him on WVSSAC letterhead, and the head coach must present that letter to the officiating crew the night of the game. If that letter is not presented to the officiating crew, that player cannot participate with a tinted eye shield. A doctor's note does not give that player permission to wear a tinted eye shield. Eye shade that is not a single stroke under the eye, or if it contains numbers or symbols, is also illegal. For eye shade to be worn properly, it's got to be one single stroke under the eye. Doesn't have to be black. It could be pink during Breast Cancer Awareness Month in October, but for it to be worn properly, one single stroke under the eye, not across the bridge of the nose, not a cross on the face, not any type of numbers or symbols on the face. This is illegal in football. In baseball, in high school baseball, a player can wear a crucifix or a cross on his face with his eye shade. In baseball, it's legal. In football, it's not. The reason why is there's two different rules committees for the two different sports. Moisture-absorbing sweatbands can only be worn on the wrist. They have to be worn within 3 inches of the wrist. They can't be worn on the calf. They can't be worn on the bicep. They can't be worn up on the forearm. So if you see this, last year, we would just have them remove it. This year, that is a 15-yard penalty on the head coach if the game is in progress. Double mouthpieces are illegal. Players are only allowed to have one mouthpiece per the previous slide. What we're starting to see is a player will have a mouthpiece in his mouth and he will have one hanging off of his helmet. This is an adornment. Officials don't think he has a mouthpiece in. They see one hanging, they're going to stop the game and send him out. So double mouthpieces are illegal, and once again, 15 yards on the head coach if seen. Jewelry is illegal. Now, we've already talked about medical alert bracelets being allowed to be worn, and religious medals are allowed to be worn if taped to the body. So officials, the way we're going to handle this is, if you see a player and he has a chain around the back of his neck and you know he has a necklace on, if that's all you see, we're going to allow it. We're going to assume he's wearing a religious medal, and we're also going to assume it's taped to his body. We're not going to check that. So what will we be looking for? If we see that piece of jewelry come outside of his uniform to where whatever the pendant might be is visible, now it is turned into illegal equipment, and once again, this is a 15-yard unsportsmanlike penalty on the head coach. Here are some examples. Here's the Armstrong band, rubber band type of device on the left arm, illegal. There's some on the player's right arm, illegal. There is the crosses on the high school baseball player's face last year. In baseball this spring and even next year, this is legal for a baseball player to do this. But in football, since it's not one single stroke under the eye, it includes a symbol, this is illegal equipment. There's also crosses on this player's face and behind the face mask, this illegal equipment. The binky mouthpiece has the handle, the plastic handle. This is a safety issue. This is illegal. This handle will snap off. If a coach has these, a player can just snap it off and then get rid of that handle, makes it now a legal mouthpiece. But with the swinging handle, it is illegal. Also, another one is the spinner, the fan spinner mouthpiece. Those are also deemed illegal due to a safety issue. Double mouthpieces, here we see the one with the green hanging off, and player number one also has one in his mouth before the play. This is an adornment. The green one hanging freely off the face mask needs to be removed after the penalty has been assessed, and this player must be removed for one down, the same as we treat an injured player. Here is an example of the necklace. You see the chain, but you also see the pendant outside of the uniform. This will now make this illegal, even if the player is wearing a cross. This is now illegal since it's outside his uniform, and this could be the difference between that coach being thrown out of that football game and being able to coach the following week. Obviously, illegal equipment here, as we have a tinted eye shield and the binky mouthpiece. This is a device that is now out there. This was brought to our attention toward the latter part of June. There are now clear eye shields out there that allow 100% light transmission. However, they have LED lights in them that light up. So this is now an adornment once the lights are turned on, making this eye shield illegal equipment. We get a lot of questions on the Oakley Prism visor. The Oakley Prism visor is illegal. It is illegal because it only allows for 89% light transmission through it. The rule says for an eye shield to be worn, the eye shield has to allow 100% light transmission. Here is a Oakley Prism visor from the side angle, and you can see the tint that it has to it. A lot of parents don't know this. They go out and buy them for their players. A lot of coaches don't know this. So we need to educate, try to do it during the practices and the scrimmages so it does not become an issue on game night. This is illegal eye shade. This is more like the teardrop down the cheek. Since it's not one single stroke under the eye, this eye shade is illegal equipment. This is the proper way to wear eye shade. Notice one single stroke under the eye. This is what we want to see if eye shade is worn, and this is the only way eye shade can be worn legally. Here we have the moisture absorbing bands on the calf of the player. This illegal equipment has to be worn within 3 inches of the wrist. So how are we going to enforce this? We're addressing it now in the rules clinics. If you're going out talking to the coaches, the players at their practices and their scrimmages, address it at this time and educate them. We're going to emphasize this during the pregame, prior to the games, no matter what level of play you have. So we ask the coaches prior to the game if all of his players are legally and properly equipped, and make them say yes. Don't make them say, or don't let them say, I think they are. We need to pin them down to a solid yes answer. And this was brought to my attention by a head coach when we were doing our in-person clinics. One of the head coaches said, I never knew what that question meant when you asked us that. I really thought you were only asking, are there any braces or casts that need to be checked? And he goes, I wasn't aware that you were asking me about eye shade and jewelry and armbands and play cards having to be worn on the wrist and not the belt. And he goes, I wasn't aware of that. So once again, we have to educate what that question really means. So with that being said, on Friday night, when you ask your coach if everyone's legally and properly equipped, you may want to say, okay, now what you're telling me is we're not going to see any illegal eye shade. We're not going to see any jewelry outside the uniform. We're not going to see any armbands worn up on the bicep or the calf, because that's what you're verifying to me. Okay, so make sure that we do that. Now, prior to the game, prior to the coin toss, if we see any of this illegal equipment, this will be the time that we preventive officiate and just say, hey, take it out, take it off, wipe it off, pull it down, move it here. We're going to try to prevent any issues once the game starts. However, once the game has begun and the game clock is officially running, this is when things change. We are going to give the coach one free pass. So if the ball is kicked off, we see illegal equipment. Let's say on one team we see three instances of illegal equipment. The officials are going to stop the game. They're going to go over to the head coach. They're going to have the players leave so they can have correction made. And the officials are going to tell the head coach, Coach, this is your free pass. You better get it cleaned up right now, because once the game resumes again, if we see any instances of illegal equipment, it's 15 yards unsportsmanlike on you. So let's say you go back out and the game starts back and you see 2 players on that same team with illegal equipment. This is in this interval now. We're only going to have 1 flag. Even though there's 2 instances, we're going to have 1 flag for this time period, and it's 15 yards on the head coach. And then you're going to let the coach know and say, Coach, that's 115. If we see anything else illegal during the rest of this game, you will be disqualified and receive your second unsportsmanlike penalty. This is the only way across the United States that we can get this illegal equipment issue fixed. We are in the situation we are in because there has been no consequence to the head coach. Even though the rule book has always said there's a consequence, we have just never enforced the penalty as written. So that is what we will start doing here in 2024. The National Guard jersey, the jersey on the right, does not comply with the new rule of 2024, where the number clearly has to contrast to the body of the jersey. However, we are making and ruling that the black numeral on the camo jersey is legal for 2024. We have a lot of these jerseys out there. A lot of teams pass them back and forth. We don't want the jerseys to be thrown away. So we are going to allow the National Guard jersey with the black letter to be worn. Now, the jersey on the left with the white numeral is the way that manufacturers have been told these jerseys have to be made in the future to comply with the rule. So if you see the white numeral, you know that's just a newer jersey, but the black numeral is still going to be allowed. The Guardian cap is legal to be worn during practice. It's also legal to be worn during games. However, and coaches make note of this, if a player suffers a catastrophic injury with a Guardian cap on his helmet, the manufacturers have told the NFHS that the manufacturer will void the warranty of that helmet since a Guardian cap has been put on it. Formations, just make sure that the players are either an offensive lineman, meaning that their head or foot breaks the waistline of the center to be an offensive lineman, or make sure they are a backfield player, meaning that no part of that player's body breaks the waistline of his nearest teammate who is on the offensive line of scrimmage. So try to get this stuff fixed during scrimmages and practices so we do not have to throw illegal formation penalties once the season begins. The game shortening procedure has changed, been added to. We still have the 35-point rule in the fourth quarter. No change has been made there. The addition we have made is now 42-point differential at halftime or in the third quarter. The game shortening procedure will begin. Now, remember, officials, at any part during the game, periods 1 through 4, both coaches, by agreement, can shorten the quarters at any time. However, the game shortening procedure running clock can never happen prior to the second half. You can never, ever do a running clock in the first half. So let's say at halftime, let's say in the second quarter, it's 52-0. And the coaches say, hey, can we knock this second quarter down to 3 minutes? If both coaches agree, the answer is yes. However, regular timing will be in effect. Now, once we get to halftime, since we're at 40, in the example I gave, we're at 42 points or greater. Instead of playing a 12-minute third quarter, the coaches might agree to play a 7-minute third quarter and still have the game shortening procedure in place. So if you have any questions regarding this edition, please feel free to reach out. Officials, make note of your classification point system. We have put more emphasis on local association meetings. Last year, if you went to 8 local association meetings, you received 20 points. This year, you will receive 30 points. And we have taken less emphasis on the number of games you work. So, for example, last year, if you worked 30 games, you got a maximum of 20 points toward your classification. This year, if you work 40 games, then you're only going to receive a maximum of 10 points toward your officials classification. Cancer Recognition Week, we started this last season. This year, we are going to honor it on October the 6th through October the 12th. During this 1 week only, players can wear a different colored whistle or a different colored lanyard of their choice to recognize the cancer of their choice. This is an individual by individual decision. This is not a crew decision. If anyone has an idea for a national rule change, please get it to the SSAC office or to me by early October. Give us time to review it, and if it's something that we feel is worthy of national consideration, we will forward it on to Indianapolis to be put on the agenda for the January meeting. I want to thank everybody for what they do. There's no game without coaches. There's no games without officials. So thank you for everything that you do for the game of football across the state of West Virginia. And I hope everybody has a great, wonderful, safe season. Thank you.